with three experts and myself. I won't class myself as an expert in for Malaysia. We are speaking with the University of West of England in Bristol, and that's Juliet, who's going to be talking specifically about the courses and what they do here in Asia. We'll also be talking to Rowena, who works for Totally Teach, who is a recruiter extraordinaire here in Malaysia and also in China. And she's going to be talking specifically about what to prepare if you are planning to move to Malaysia and teach. And then also Gary Kens, who is the head of a leading international school here in Malaysia. And he will be talking about what he specifically would be looking for if you were to apply for a job at his school. So lots to consider. I will just do a quick introduction, just sort of some background on Malaysia and what it is and what it isn't. Then what we will do is we'll break out into what we call breakout rooms. If you haven't used those before, don't stress about it too much. You just basically select whichever breakout room you want to go into. There's four options. One is mine, one is Gary, one is Rowena, and one is Juliet. So you jump into those rooms. We'll spend around about 20 minutes, maybe slightly longer if people need that, in those breakout rooms. During that time, you can ask a couple of questions, but I would try to maybe limit those questions to the end where we can sort of draw everything together. We will be recording this, and also the breakout rooms as well will be recording. So don't stress too much if you are only obviously in one breakout room, which is understandable unless you're able to go back in time. So we will be recording all four breakout rooms. We will be recording the whole session. So don't worry if you don't if you've joined a session you want to listen to the other one. That isn't a problem. So before we start, some Malaysia basics. Probably everybody does know about Kuala Lumpur. KL is the shortened version of that. Malaysia isn't just all about KL. I know some people might know a little bit about Kuala Lumpur, but it isn't just one thing. Okay, so when you see a lot of information, you see a lot of pictures of Malaysia. Obviously, you'll see the Petronas Towers, which is the Twin Towers, which is in KLCC, which is in the middle of Kuala Lumpur. That is obviously the iconic buildings. That's sort of the thing that everybody knows, and it is what they use for the most part with promoting the country. A few things that people do need to know. English is widely spoken countrywide. If you are a Chinese speaker, I would say that Chinese is also extensively spoken throughout the country. Different types of Chinese are spoken in different parts of the country, but for the most part, if you speak Chinese, Mandarin Chinese, or if you're from Hong Kong or Taiwan and you speak if you speak other dialects as well, they will also be spoken here in China, here in Malaysia. KL is one of the safest major cities in Asia. Crime is extremely low. I wouldn't say it's non-existent. If I am speaking to you in China, obviously China's on a different level in terms of safety and all the rest of it. Though you do need to keep an eye on things, maybe after dark, or maybe you have to, look after your mobile phone and things like that. But I personally haven't. I've been here for 2 years and I haven't heard of anyone having anything stolen from them. So it is a very safe place, but you just need to be aware of things. You need to be aware of your belongings, and don't just leave your laptop lying around for the days on end in a coffee shop and expect it to be there when you come back, as you would be, say, in Singapore and in China. The cost of living is much lower than in Singapore and Hong Kong. I would say also, if you were to compare it with other cities as well, Bangkok, Also, Vietnam as well, Ho Chi Minh City. Certainly, compared with Bangkok, is much much cheaper than Bangkok. Everyday living is much cheaper. So comparable cities throughout Asia, I would say that Kuala Lumpur is the most expensive city in Malaysia, but it's still much much cheaper than the vast majority of major cities in and around Asia, and that also would include most cities in China as well. Some of the major cities like Guangzhou or Shanghai, Beijing, Shenzhen, places like that, Kuala Lumpur would come out probably slightly cheaper than most of those, or much cheaper if you include the whole package together. The international school sector has been around for a very long time, so it's well established. We've got schools that are 100 plus years. The English speaking schools have been in Malaysia for a very long time. So places like Alice Smith Garden International, these schools have been around for a very long time, and they are well established. KTJ is another one that's been around for a long time. But it's not to say that these well established schools are the best schools. It's just to say that the international teaching scene has been around for a long time, and that and that established scene obviously fosters new growth within the industry. So, for example, schools here are still growing. I wouldn't say that the vast majority of schools around, certainly in China at the moment, would be all growing, but I would say that the vast majority of schools in Malaysia are growing. There are new schools coming up. Not as many as there were maybe a couple of years ago, but certainly there are new schools establishing. So there is a very vibrant scene here, and I don't think if you were to apply for a job here, I think if you have the right credentials, you would you would find a place for you here. Housing is affordable and private healthcare is reliable. So both of those things, housing is exceptionally affordable. So for example, I live in a probably the most expensive part of Kuala Lumpur, or one of, in a three-bed detached house with a swimming pool, with a football pitch, with a gym, and it costs close to probably around about 10,000 RMB a month, and that's considered expensive. So 10,000 RMB contextualized, that's around about £1,000, 1,600 US dollars. So for a three-bed house with all the amenities, all the swimming pool, all the grass, all the space, um, extremely affordable. If you compare it with like for like, especially if you compared it with somewhere like Shanghai or um, Singapore, just there's no comparison at all with Hong Kong. So space is not an issue in terms of like the size of the properties here. They're all well maintained. All the properties have swimming pools, or most of the properties will have a gym. And if you don't have a gym or a pool within your property, you will have one very, very close by. Families enjoy a warm climate and a strong expat community. I would definitely say that. I would say that the expat community here is very, very vibrant. There's lots of things going on every weekend. Pretty much, there's some event going on. You can explore nearby places. You would need to have a car. I would recommend that would be probably your first purchase as you arrive. I know it sounds a little bit strange, especially if you're coming from places where the transport. So I lived in Shanghai for 19 years, and I never had a car in Shanghai. So it was a bit of a culture shock coming here and having to buy a car immediately. But actually, it was probably the best thing that I did when I arrived. It is still very much a car orientated city and car orientated country. Cars are very cheap to buy. Secondhand cars are extremely cheap. Fuel is a fraction of the price pretty much in anywhere else in Asia. And it is really affordable to maintain your car and keep it running really well. So the only thing I would say is don't buy a foreign branded car. Buy a local branded car that's made in Malaysia, or a local Nissan or something like that that can be well maintained and fixed here. Travel across Southeast Asia is quick and easy. So AirAsia is the main hub for KL or throughout Asia. Basic Air. There's four or five really excellent low cost airlines that fly anywhere. So, for example, I can get to Bangkok in 2 hours, Singapore in an hour and a half, Phuket hour and a half. Um, it's I can get to Jakarta if you wanted to fly to Jakarta on holiday. Bali in a couple of hours. And then you can go further afield as well, of course, and you're a major hub. You can go down to Perth in 4.5 hours. So it's convenient, and it's easy and affordable to get around. As long as you buy your tickets in advance, it's very good. And then finally, day trips from most cities are done by car. So as I said, if you wanted to go to the beach, a couple of hours you can go to a nice beach. 5 hours you can go to Langkawi. If you want to go a little bit further afield, go diving and things like that. It's really easy to do driving, obviously avoiding traffic on public holidays, etc. But from a personal perspective, Malaysia is a great place to live, especially if you've got a young family. Um, it's a really easy place to live here, and it's very affordable. So, just a quick one here. So these are the different breakout rooms that you can choose from. So myself, I'm going to be talking about sort of the day-to-day life of what's it like living in Malaysia for teachers. Okay, I'm not a teacher, but I do have lots of friends who are teachers, and I do understand what it's like living here. So I'm trying to give you a bit of context of moving there as a um, as a family of four from China. So I know a lot of you will be speaking. I will be speaking to people that potentially would be thinking about moving from China through to Malaysia. I can speak to you about that. Gary's going to be talking about what it's like to receive an application from outside. So he's a leading teacher in, I think, the top school in terms of results wise in Kuala Lumpur, maybe even Malaysia. It's the leading academic school, St. Joseph's in the centre of KL. So he receives hundreds of applications every cycle. Rowena from Totally Teach will be talking specifically about how to prepare for applying for jobs in Malaysia, and then Juliet, who's from UE Bristol, will be talking about what the qualifications are and what have you. So. Um, from okay, so we've got the breakout rooms. So if you should be able to see, can people see the breakout rooms for to jump in? Um, we can go through these questions. If we can go through all of these questions afterwards, okay? Yeah. Okay, so can everybody see if everybody can see the rooms, get yourself, jump into the rooms now, decide on which room you want to go to, and click on that link. If you're not sure, just let me know and I'll put you in that group, in that, I'll put you in that room. Okay. So I should be seeing people jumping into those rooms now. Can everyone see the rooms? Yeah. Okay. If you're not sure about which room to go into, don't worry too much. Okay, so I'm just going to start assigning people to different rooms. If you're not going to do it, I'm just going to assign you. Okay.
At the British School, Beijing, and then for the last 10 years, as I said, I've been at St. Joseph's Institution International. So I'll just talk you through from a head of school perspective what the process is like, and give you some insight into the way that I approach interviews in the hope that it will benefit you if you're thinking about applying to schools in Malaysia. So first of all, as I'm sure you're all aware, it is a very competitive market. And Malaysia, I think, is quite a desirable destination. I would say that the demographic of applicants that we get and the people that we hire, um, I don't think it's conscious, but we do end up with a lot of families in Malaysia. And I think that one of the appeals about Malaysia, particularly in the location where we are as a school, is that it's quite a nice, quiet suburban area. And the great thing about Malaysia is that it only takes you 20 minutes on a weekend to get into the heart of KL. And that's not something that can be said about many capital cities in Asia. So I think that that is a wonderful benefit of it. So obviously, we use platforms like TES, and that's now, of course, merged with Scroll. So, the platform that we use, we're able to see all of the applications that come in. And the first step, really, for us is looking at the experience and background of the candidates. One thing that might come up, I think, for overseas candidates as well, is due to regulations within Malaysia. It's incredibly difficult for us to get an employment pass for people to work in Malaysia without a PGCE or without a Bachelor's of Education. So I think that that's one thing to really consider when you're applying to Malaysia. That certainly since the pandemic, it's a lot more difficult for us to get employment passes without those qualifications. The letter of application is something very important to us, and as I move on to the interview, one thing that I'm really looking for is for people to have researched the school and to have looked into the very specific identity of our school. Now, what I mean by that is our school is a Lasallian school, so the ethos of our school, although our students get outstanding academic results. It's a very holistic environment. There's a lot of focus on service learning within the school. So when I'm putting together my interview questions, about 50% of them are going to be about your experience and background, but the other 50% is going to be questions about character, about relationships with students, and things of that nature. So the first thing that I would say, my first questions, starting questions, are often going to be about that. What is it that appeals to you about the school? And the advice that I would give there is, and I would say that this is probably true of the whole interview experience. I would say that it's important to move between very general philosophical questions about approaches to education, but then move into very specific details. So, this is what I believe, or this is what I've experienced in my career, and then this is how I've implemented it. And because our school is so focused on holistic education, when I'm reading a letter of application, if it's only about the academic results that I achieved and the interview starts and it's all about the academic results, that's not what I'm always, well, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for, um, yes, I want to see those student outcomes, but I'm more interested in how do you get the students to those outcomes. I'm more interested in how do you create a warm and supportive environment for your students so that I can see whether the values that you are talking about aligns with the values of our school. So that's very important. The next thing that I would talk about is absolutely, yes, growth and impact on the students. The next thing that I think is very important to me is, digging into the pedagogy. I've been doing a lot of interviews lately. We've got a number of adverts that are alive, and again, it's about digging into the specifics. So, if we're talking about the components of a lesson, and how students learn it, engagement is important, but I really want to hear in the responses that you are up to date with, what is effective teaching and learning, your awareness and understanding of academic research into how students learn. And I would say that a lot of schools, if you look through their website, there might be sections on the website that very specifically talk about the approaches to teaching and learning. Some schools will have, even in the policy section of their school website, the teaching and learning policy, for example. They might have the assessment policy. And a big thing is understanding, I think, where the impact is. One of the things that I might recommend to you is looking at the Teaching Toolkit by the Education Endowment Foundation, which is a website that really sort of shares lots of academic research. And if you've not seen it before, what's really good about this website is that it ranks or it identifies sort of strategies that and lists them in terms of how much it costs to implement, um, what the research or how much research there is about that particular area of practice, and then it also measures the impact. So something like metacognition is low cost. There's lots of research education about it, but also it's high impact. Whereas something like smaller class sizes, high cost, not necessarily a particularly high impact, as evidenced by research. So, I'm looking for things like assessment for learning in there. I'm looking for um, components of the lesson in that section. Again, the specifics. As I talked about, the relationships is very important. And when I move on to looking at the relationships between a teacher and a student, again, I'm looking for the specifics. So rather than sort of ask you a very general question about, what builds strong relationships within a classroom, I might say, tell me about a specific time in which a relationship that you've developed with a student has had a positive impact on their learning experience. So then, rather than those broad brushstrokes about, how do we build relationships, I want to see, how you've done that. It might be, and you might give me an example of a particular student that was struggling with your subject, and then you went the extra mile and showed support to them to help them achieve what they needed to achieve. Relationships inside and outside of the classroom. So, we'll often talk about how do you contribute to the broader life of the school? Have you been involved in sports teams? Do you do the Duke of Edinburgh Award? Do you do the World Scholars Cup? And I think that when you're looking at the philosophy of the school, for example, at our school, we don't run after school activities that are more English, more maths. Um, our after school activities are about nurturing character in students. So we want to see them step outside their comfort zone. So any examples that you've got of that, I think are really useful to us in seeing whether you'll be the right fit for our school. As I said, 50% of our interview questions are about character. And in the elementary school, if you're an elementary school teacher, a really important aspect of our school is the Virtues Project. So our interview panel in the elementary school, they might ask you to reflect on particular virtues that you have or area of your character that you're working on. The most important lesson that you've learned as an educator. And what we're doing in that situation is we're trying to sort of see how effectively you can reflect on yourself as a person. Because I think that in a school like ours, when you're talking about the character development and growth of students, it's important that you're able to model that in yourself as well. And I think that in those scenarios, when you're being asked those sorts of questions, it's absolutely fine to be vulnerable. It's okay to talk about mistakes or things that you did that didn't work effectively. I think one of the beauties of international education is that you can try things and take risks within a classroom and make mistakes. But that's okay because you've got the space there to demonstrate your personal growth. The last sort of probably the most important section of an interview process is the evidence of your knowledge and understanding of safeguard and best practice. And it may be that there are specific examples that you can give. Of course, that would need to be a confidential scenario. But what I'm looking for is, if you're applying to me as a science teacher, I'm not really looking for you to only be a science teacher and that's, all you care about. I want you to be a form tutor. I want you to be a supportive form tutor. I want you to show an interest in safeguarding and the well-being of children. And that's an expectation that we have of all of our teachers. So when you get to that section of the interview and the safeguarding questions come up, it's really important that your knowledge of safeguard and best practice is up to date. Now, a lot of the schools, particularly the British schools, each year there's an annual report that's published by the Department of Education in the UK. Called Keeping Children Safe in Education. And that's a really important document to us because as that's published each year, we will update our policy to reflect any changes in that. So I think that if you've got an awareness of safeguarding best practice, how to manage a disclosure, you talk about the reporting systems in your current school. Do you use platforms like My Concern? Do you use platforms like CPOMs? Is there a clear process in your school if a student makes a disclosure and who you report that to? Making sure that you promise not to keep confidentiality with a student that's vulnerable. All of those things really are what we're looking for. So be prepared to talk about the training that you've done, experiences that you've had, show care and understanding for the students, and that's really a key thing. The language is important. I did an interview recently, and my first question was about what interests you to about the school. And that candidate, within the first few minutes in responding to that question, started to talk about the experiences in another school or another country, and I kept picking up the word frustrated over and over again. I was frustrated by this. I was frustrated by that. Before we'd even got on to what was it specifically about our school that appealed. And straight away I was thinking, okay, there's a pattern emerging there. And it did come up later in the interview as well. So, starting in that positive, energetic frame of mind, the enthusiasm, the drive, right from the start, that first impression is particularly important. Holistic education. I think that every school website now talks about holistic education. Lots of schools market themselves as holistic. But I'm going to drill down into, what does that mean to you? What does it really mean in practice? I think that there's been a shift, certainly in my time, where, and I do think some of it's quite cynical, where schools will talk about their virtues and they'll talk about their, how what they believe, but in practice, what is the reality of that? What does it really mean? So I'm going to dig into that and I'm going to find out what holistic education means to you. Because I want to see if what you're saying is an authentic, or if you think that it's really what I just want to hear because I work at a school that's got that on the website. So those really are some sort of tips in terms of what I'm looking for during the interview process. So yeah, so I mean, if you've got any specific questions, I'd be quite happy to answer them and offer any tips and guidance that I can. Yeah, I can see. Thank you, KU, for posting keeping children safe in education there in the document. As I said, that's something that's updated every year and it's evolving all the time. Obviously, with the use of artificial intelligence, across the world, we're already, in the UK and in Malaysia, seeing incidents of deep fake technology being a problem within schools. So it's not just AI in terms of academic honesty, which is a lot of the focus in schools. But the first thing that I thought about was, as a former designated safeguarding lead, what does this mean in terms of protecting children in schools? And whilst it's very exciting, there's a real safeguarding concern with that. What curriculums do more schools follow? Is the level of student knowledge similar to China? Um, Yes, there are a lot of British schools in Malaysia. A lot of schools which are IGCSE. A lot of schools which are A level. There aren't as many schools that offer the IBDP. And Malaysia, I've always found is a bit of an anomaly, as the rest of the world is moving from A level to IBDP. A lot of schools within Malaysia still offer the A level. But there are IBDP schools in Malaysia as well. Some of the schools would be ISKL, IGB is another school. Nexus International School goes from IGCSE to IBDP. But there are a lot of schools that are still very, very British in terms of their curriculum. Um, Yes. Yeah, yeah. Since the pandemic, or before the pandemic, I don't think it was as strict. But since the pandemic, the Ministry of Education in Malaysia became a lot stricter with the qualifications that teachers need to have in order to get an employment pass. PGCE or a bachelor's in education are really some of the requirements that teachers need to have. Now, I've had teachers that have had QTS, and there used to be a program in the UK. Called the Graduate Teacher Program. And even though the teacher had been teaching in Malaysia for a long time, when she moved to our school and we applied for the employment pass, it was really difficult for us to get her a teacher's permit. We had to actually go back and get in touch with her old school in the UK where she'd worked about 15 years ago for them to write a letter to say that she'd worked there and for the period that she'd had. So a PGCE and a or a bachelor's of education is really important. A TEFL wouldn't be sufficient in order to get a teaching qualification, a teaching permit as an overseas teacher, in my experience. Yep, a master's of teaching. Yep, that would be sufficient. Absolutely. Thank you, KU. What would schools look for in a leader for business economics? What is the minimum expectation for an SLT role? How can I further improve myself after IPGCE, MP? So you have those the MPQSL as well, KU? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that for a middle leadership position or a senior leadership position, you're looking for experience in the role. The questions are going to be slightly different. If you're applying for a middle leadership position or a senior leadership position, there are going to be aspects of it which are about leadership. It's going to be about vision. It's going to be about how you develop others. It's going to be about delegation. It's going to be about you know, what the type of leader that you are, specific situations which you've found yourself in. For example, it might be managing conflict between members of your team. And then there are going to be aspects of it which are about, management. So I would ask questions there about things like performance management. How do you set targets for members of your team? How do you monitor performance? What happens if a member of your team isn't meeting the expectations? How do you bring them back? I think that schools would have their appraisal system in place. We do. Start of the year initial targets. Some of those targets are going to be linked to the school development plan in terms of the broader aims of the school. Then that's going to be taken down to a departmental level. What experience do you have of setting those departmental goals? And then what are your personal goals that you're working on? And if you've got a teacher that is struggling, you're doing the learning walks, the observations, dropping into lessons, and you see that, how do you get that teacher back on track? How do you meeting with them regularly, supporting them, coaching them? So those are the types of experiences that we're looking for middle leadership and senior leadership when we're looking at candidates and interviewing candidates for those positions. Yes, currently a good number of low-level English students, and how do you guys deal with that? That's a great question, and I think that there are a lot of schools and in Malaysia, certainly since the pandemic, that have had a lot of applications from countries like China, Japan, and Korea. Since the borders opened in Malaysia, I think that all of the schools have been really inundated with applications for that. And I would, every school does it differently. And I think that we uh, sort of anticipated this, and before the borders opened, worked with some EAL consultants to get our EAL provision ready. I think that our philosophy is we've been doing a lot of work about adaptive teaching. We've been looking at strategies in the classroom. So rather than sort of traditional methods of, in the UK where you would get different worksheets for different levels of ability, looking at strategies that support all students. So it's a benefit to all students if you put key vocabulary on the board. Not just a small number of students, but all students. Puts the definitions on the board. Be really clear about what the objectives of the lessons are. You know, I think that we might sort of pair up students that are more proficient with students that are not as proficient, and allow them to use their own language to explain a concept in their own language, because of course they probably do know the concept in their own language. So I think that rather than when I first moved to Thailand many years ago, children were punished for speaking their own language. And at our school, we don't agree with that. We think that as long as it's on task, and the student is, explaining a concept, for example, that can actually accelerate the understanding of the student as well. So again, lots of schools, I know from talking to the head teachers, lots of schools have different approaches to that. I think that ours has been effective, and we've seen students make great progress. But yeah, that would be the approach that we take. John, would you like me to wrap it up there?
If there's anyone got any other questions? Okay, last one from Mukhtar.
Hello.
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 Hi.
Oh, hi. Can you hear me okay? I've obviously got a number of questions, obviously, but I wasn't sure like who's the right person really to speak to. And
Hi.
I didn't I suppose it's like I wanted to speak to the right person in the right timing, otherwise I didn't want to speak in the wrong time or anything like that. I was quite sensitive about that. So yeah, always choosing the right time, the right place is always good for me. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm sort of very, very sort of interested in the sort of opportunity, you know, and obviously when I heard about teaching Malaysia, it's like I think I'd like to think I could do it, I'm very interested in the idea of doing it. And obviously I want to study for higher qualifications as soon as possible. I think to do that. And yeah, I feel like I'm at the stage in my life where I've missed on quite a lot. And I think sometimes it's ready. You've got to go back and retake the have the chance to do it, because I'm 38 and it's like I haven't had the best. um I haven't had a very good year. I've had things going wrong and everything like that, family and stuff like that. And it's like, I want to, um, I think it's opportunities that I want to just take it. You see, so I suppose, I'm quite curious to, find out just more about, just how to do it really, and
Yeah. So have you
and
have
to see
you
if
have
I
you got have you got a specific question?
First of all, that's obviously, for me, I mean, obviously, I mean, I had some obviously opportunities, obviously in China and stuff, and but it's like obviously like first of all, I wanted to make sure that obviously it was complete, everything was could be verified and things like that and stuff. But yeah, so first of all, where can I find out like applying for positions? Where can I which listings are the best ones to find first of all
Mm.
for applying for jobs?
Yeah, I think TES is definitely the biggest platform
Yeah,
that you can use, and
yeah,
so that's primarily where we post all of our jobs when we're looking for expatriate candidates,
yeah,
or local
yeah.
candidates as well. I mean, we use other platforms within Malaysia,
Mhm.
to if there's for our learning assistants, for example, but
Yeah,
certainly for overseas jobs, tes.com is the best for us.
yeah. Yeah, like I'm very sort of obviously aware. Obviously, it's very, very important to get certain things for obviously for the point pass, and I think that I'm at the point where I want to try and take the opportunity to gain the qualifications because it's just important for me because I teach online and I care so much about the people like I teach. I mean, like every day I think about I there's been students I've spoken to that I haven't taught in a year and I still think about them now. I still think about how they're doing, how their journeys and everything. I'm kind of like that really, and it's
Okay.
like it's
Right.
such a my story is such a long one. It's so long, but it's
Okay.
like,
Can
you
we?
know,
We're just
yes.
we're gonna have to cut it short here. We're
Oh,
just gonna go back into the main room.
yeah.
Right.
Sorry.
Cheers. Bye.
No worries, no worries. Thank you. Mm.
Hello.
Ah,
You all right? I think we're pretty much done now, I think. I can ask maybe, is there anything you want to do as like a bring it all together, like a bit of a summary? Gary, do you want to do anything? Do you want to give some words of positive positive energy to send people on their way?
Yeah, I just think I mean whether you've been internationally or not, or you're thinking about internationally, Malaysia is a fantastic country to work. I've been here for 10 years. I've raised my two children here. They were both born here, and I just think that sometimes maybe it's not always on everybody's radar. But
Yeah.
I would just say it's such a wonderful place to work. So best of luck with your applications, and I hope that if you're in my room, that I've given some information that's useful and will benefit you in some way. So thank you.
No problem.
Hmm. Sure.
Juliet, is there anything you'd like to sort of add from a UE from a UE perspective in terms of applying for jobs? Maybe not necessarily specifically in Malaysia, but just in general.
No, I just was saying that most of my students find that they can apply for a wider selection of jobs if they've got an IPGCE, and it often means that they get career promotions within their schools. And if you feel like you're not getting the widest choice that you can from applying to different places, and you're also coming up against across that brick wall that people want some sort of
Yeah.
teaching qualification, it certainly is an option that you could consider. So yes, that's all.
Yeah, and I think also that it is flexible as well. So for people that are,
Yeah.
potentially wanting to make the step up to, I don't like calling it top tier schools, but a school similar to Gary's, if they're wanting to make the move into a school like that that's well resourced, the students are, um, they're very able students. Parents are very supportive. If you're wanting to make a move into that kind of school, then you need the credentials, you need those qualifications. There's no real substitute for it. And as Gary pointed out, if you apply without, um, it, I wouldn't say it's pointless, but it's pretty pointless because Gary can't get you a visa. Simple as that. It's nothing personal. If you can't get a visa, you can't work at his school. Um, and Rowena, is there one thing that teachers should know before moving to Malaysia? Is there anything that um, you think that people should consider before moving?
Yeah, in my session, I just talked about, what's your long-term career goals?
Mm,
I compared it obviously to China and kind of, are you looking more for a place to settle down, as Gary said, and teachers that I've spoken to, they've been in Malaysia for 8, 9, 10 years,
mm,
raised children there, and done so much. What I raised in my talk was about the tax when you first move over, being aware of that 182 days to change your tax residency, making sure that you financially plan for that because it's really important. But I think it's going to get competitive, and having
yeah.
knowing what the schools want and how your applications are looking is really important. So we can
Mm,
all help with that.
yeah. And then Gary, lastly, if somebody was looking, someone is similar to you, sort of long-term prospects, if they wanted to move to Malaysia, what are the prospects for somebody that potentially wants to move maybe into leadership management or something similar to that?
Yeah, I think the prospects are very high. I started at St. Joseph's as head of English in 2016, and by 2022 I was head of school. So I think that there are opportunities there. I think that it's all about I think the attitude, the work ethic, the collegiality. I think all those things are really important, but there are opportunities, and many of us were looking really for internal candidates. So sometimes, I think that don't be don't fear a side what might feel a sideways step sometimes, because I think or even moving to a larger school, we've got 1,100 students. You demonstrate what you're capable of, and there will be opportunities.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And as I said, if you've got that positive mindset and you're one of
Yeah,
those people that come to a school and get things done, you'll get noticed, right? The people love those
absolutely.
kind of people. So yeah, and also, even though there aren't probably as many schools opening in the next couple of years as there probably was in the last few years, there's still new schools opening. And from my, speaking to other people in lots of schools in Malaysia, there aren't many schools contracting. From speaking to other schools, to everybody, most schools are expanding, and some schools are expanding really quickly. So, there are opportunities, and if you join a school, that there will be other opportunities as the school gets bigger as well. As I said, have you got any perspective on that, Rowena, from a China perspective or from a Malaysia perspective?
Yeah, I said there's a big shift in Chinese students going to Malaysia and Thailand, basically. So they are funneling in because the international school tuition is cheaper than in mainland China. So the schools are expanding in that way. I was saying that we had schools asking for Chinese teachers and Chinese liaisons to help with the families that are coming over and to do that. So whereas obviously we all know kind of what's happening with the market in China due to the birth rate and so forth, other markets are looking very exciting. And with that sort of growth, schools like Gary's can be more flexible and be able to offer opportunities of career development and growth to teachers. So it just makes it quite an exciting market for teachers that are looking for that long-term career goal.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are probably, we're speaking to them in China. I think you also need to lean into the fact that you've actually worked with mainland Chinese students, and really like lean into that because it is a unique skill set. And if you've been working with them for a long period of time, don't underestimate how difficult that is for people who haven't worked with mainland Chinese students before. It is a
Yeah.
really unique skill set, and I wouldn't say they're completely different to the rest of Asia, but they do have their unique challenges dealing with mainland Chinese parents as well. It's really, if you can do that well, you should really lean into that and make it a sort of front and center of your application because all schools have significant numbers of mainland Chinese students.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think that's pretty much it. I think if there's any other questions, by all means, yeah, yeah. If anyone has any other questions, please just add me on WeChat or WhatsApp. There's no problems in doing that. If there are any questions specifically that you want to pass on to Juliet, Rowena, Gary, or myself, please do that. You can do that either probably by email is not a bad thing if you haven't got my WeChat or WhatsApp. Please do send on those questions, and I'd like to sort of say thank you very much to Gary, Juliet, and Rowena for offering their insights into moving to this excellent country, Malaysia, and I wish